So thank you again for having me twice. Hope you remember me from yesterday. And before I dive in, I just want you to know that IFC has another product for disaster resilience. So I've heard that a lot, and it was actually a bit of a surprise to me. Normally we hear such focus on disaster resilience maybe from South Asia or Southeast Asia. So it was really interesting to hear it here in Africa. We have a product called the Building Resilience Index. I'll see if Dennis tomorrow can squeeze a bit of the demo along with the masterclass on Edge, Asha, and Read, our tools, to show you how you can map out your risk exposure using the Building Resilience Index and some of the best practices to embed response to climate adaptation into your projects. But what I'm here today is to talk a little bit about the public-private partnerships and really the case for the city's role in housing as well. So the role of the government in public housing really has changed over the years. And there's a great paper by our World Bank colleagues called the Public-Private Partnerships for Investment and Delivery of Affordable Housing. And again, I think Kessia and her team have already uploaded this into the resource library. So you can see the evolution of government from architect, builder, regulator, entrepreneur, but now the part of the conversation is around what are the fiscal constraints given the myriad of crises. I mean, it started maybe with 2008, and I think crises are still going on that really lead to the case for the PPPs. For successful housing markets to function, there really needs to be a combination of both supply and demand, and enabled by kind of the macro environment in the country. This particular slide is from the World Bank Group's Housing Deep Dive. So this is one of our key areas. There is a coordinated strategy. So I think it's kind of interesting to talk about, and the conversation here has been on both ends. And the PPP part can really talk about that supply end, but some of the enabling environment by the government can also help out on the demand as well. We really do believe that public-private collaboration can make housing more affordable. And this allows, first, the public sector. The public sector can deliver services while freeing up those limited public funds. It could tap into the financial resources for construction and operations of housing unit and transfer some of the risk to a private entity which limits the government exposure. And this sort of transfer fosters innovation and better value for money in the end. But the collaboration also allows the private sector to benefit from the provision of land, trunk infrastructure, and other incentives. The private sector can diversify their portfolios going into both the affordable and the higher income market. And they can enjoy government incentives for other KPIs that maybe government itself could not deliver, such as focus on gender, green, disaster preparedness, and many, many other ones. PPPs, particularly through municipal governments, again, we believe that they can be quite effective in answering urban challenges. Our feeling is that competitive cities need four things: robust institutions and regulations, effective infrastructure and land management, access to finance, and four, to be able to attract skills and innovation. And we think that cities must smartly leverage their own balance sheet, so to have fiscal autonomy to borrow with proper oversight, which would allow the cities to address these interconnected urbanization challenges they face. For example, green bonds for cities can be a really effective tool for them to borrow on commercial terms and then deploy that finance directly. There are many benefits and many challenges, and Jacques will talk about parts of both of the picture, why PPPs for affordable housing could be really beneficial. We must pause to recognize that affordable housing PPPs are in fact different from other infrastructure projects. While in most infrastructure projects there is a operation part for maybe 20 or 30 years of the asset, so the private sector gets a license to operate maybe a road or a utility. In an affordable housing PPP, there's a transfer of those units to the buyers. And this creates some complexities in the end. The benefits mean that, again, each stakeholder can focus on their strengths, there's some cost savings, these lead to deadline incentives, and the government can expand the services. There is a lot of challenges, including procurement complexity, making sure that there's a open process that cannot be accused of corruption, making sure that reputational risks, such as we heard a little bit from Madam May around even things like site selection and others, that all of those are taken into account, and again making sure that both parties, both the government and the private sector side, have appropriate access to finance. So we do believe that well-structured PPPs can be the key, and IFC can help the government, whether it's on the national level or on the municipal level, choose the right PPP structure given the local context. There's many different ones, and again, this is adapted from the World Bank paper on the public-private partnerships. There's another great World Resources Institute module looking mostly into India that looks at PPPs both on the government land and on private land. Models where government is the off-taker, it sells the units, models where the private sector is the off-taker, and then variations. Some of the variations that we've talked about are this mixed development, where the private sector developer can sell the upper income units and thus recover the costs and bring down the ultimate cost for the affordable sector, or having sort of annuity or hybrid annuity process. South Africa is doing some interesting work with development rights for brownfield housing, so allowing additional construction on top of an existing building that will go affordable, and again with a mixture of affordable and upper income units as well. What IFC is doing in our new initiative is to investigate how we can help particularly city governments structure PPPs and deploy access to finance and to housing for the ultimate end buyers. And depending on the local need and the ability to borrow, IFC can work with both technical assistance as well as finance with different stakeholders in the group. So it could be working with the city government directly, it could be working with the developer, or deploying finance either for construction finance or for mortgages through the local financial institutions. So this is a project we call Housing for Cities, and it's the one that we're cooking up right now and seeing where it may go. And we also have a program to help cities deploy incentives for the private sector. So again, talking both on the fiscal incentive side, but even more, as Dennis had mentioned earlier, structuring non-fiscal incentives that are going to catalyze the developers to move into the green sphere without costing the government any money, such as faster permitting, higher density, and others. So before I turn it over to Olivia, I was going to talk a little bit about some of the work done for communities, so going beyond particular building into communities, and then Jacques will talk about some of the live projects. We do have a video to show you. If you can cue it up, I can go back. And it's for our great PPP project in South Africa.
When we lived in Elstriver, there was a few problems. The gangsterism is very bad there. The boys there, 9, 8 years old, they're running with guns around. You can't let your kids play outside anymore.
I didn't want my kids to grow up in that environment.
Miyamoto is a not-for-profit company. I started it in 2005.
Trying to get people out of bad buildings and off the street into decent accommodation.
Inadequate housing brings lots of its own challenges. There's lots of gangs, drugs, alcohol abuse. It's a breeding ground for crime.
So we wanted to create hope, and I think housing is one of those things that creates hope. When Madulumo started to look at the greening of our projects, it was purely driven from a cost point of view of utilities. How can we get utilities down? So if we talk about electricity or we talk about water, how do we design in such a way that you get a green building? The IFC is an international finance corporation. They designed a tool called EDGE. EDGE stands for Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies. EDGE helps developers to think green, but also then to apply it into their design from the onset. Bella Gardens is the first EDGE certified social housing project in South Africa. Our tenants are telling us how much better it is to live there.
For me, it's to have security in your complex. It's most of the best things we experience. My kids can play outside.
The first thing they noticed was the parking, because there wasn't parking in Elsriver that you can take your kids to. Yeah, I'm standing out by the window and I look through the parking and it's very nice for them.
We thrive for something different. And with this, we were privileged enough to get an EDGE certificate. Yes, gives us food, fruit, vegetables, all in there.
For Bella Gardens, we got a reduction in energy. That is because our window to wall ratio, the fact that we used heat pumps. Water saving, that's because of the water restrictors that we placed onto all of the taps. People can see the consumption, the education that goes about that. If you know you stay in a place which was designed to be energy efficient, if there's a different mindset there, then you also want to save energy. And what does it mean for me and my family? And then you start to use less water because you also want to contribute to the ethos.
I'm saving maybe around about 1,000 rand every month.
There's a huge difference in that time and now. So now I can go extra with the food. I can buy extra food, I can buy extra clothes, extra shoes for them. There's no more like I don't have now and I can't do it now.
Knowing that people can save money, it makes me really feel that I'm doing something right, or at least we are doing something right. All we are is a stepping stone. Our objective is to getting you through the journey, giving them that step to the future. With the savings that you can achieve just by following the simple green solutions which we have in place, you will grow and get your own place.
So I applied to move into Bella Gardens early in 2015. At Bella Gardens we saved with rent, we saved with electricity, big time. Big news, we're moving to a bigger house.
When you change people's behavior patterns, you change their lives, not in a small way, but in a big way. And sustainability showed me that there's things better out there than what we used to.
And I think that's the blueprint. The blueprint is that how does it make a community change? How does it make children look different at the place where they're staying? We can do this again. We've got a blueprint that we can do again and that we should do again.
Well, that was pretty inspiring. Okay, so I'm Olivia Nielsen at Miyamoto, and I do a lot of housing PPPs. I don't know why, but I've been doing a lot more of them these days, including with Jacques here from the IFC in Djibouti. And today, I'd like to discuss a bit about the issues with housing PPPs and also some of their opportunities, especially when it comes to green living. Okay, so a quick census I did a few years ago was that 41 out of 54 countries in Africa announced very large housing projects. The government said, we're going to build 10,000 houses, we're going to build 100,000 houses, we're going to build 1 million houses. That's amazing. And often, PPPs are identified as this panacea solution. We're going to partner with the private sector, we're going to do PPPs, and we're just going to build a lot of houses at scale. And it sounds pretty magical. But time and time again, they fail. They're announced, there's a big press release, and I'm kind of a collector. This is not from Africa because I didn't want to offend anyone today. but I collect the press releases, and then I follow up a few years later, and there's a lot of failures in the PPP world. And it's a worldwide phenomenon. I actually just presented a similar presentation at the Asian Development Bank, too. This is not unique to Africa, so do not worry. We have solutions for you. PPPs are difficult. They take a lot of planning, and so luckily we have our colleagues here from the IFC to help you with that planning. It's not just about a handshake between the government and a developer. It requires putting together the right enabling environment, the right laws, putting a lot of technical planning, doing the feasibility studies, which is what we're currently doing with the IFC. Picking the right land, location is key. It's really hard to work magic when you're in a poor location. And really thinking through your offtake. Who is the effective demand? How are you going to go down market? Who is the right developer you're going to pick? And once you've figured out all these things, then you can start putting together your PPP. You can start thinking through, the basics of the housing PPP. And this is really, I think, the basics. You need to get the basics right. You need to do your planning. You need to do your homework. And often, it can be what? 1, 2, sometimes 3 years of homework before you even go to market and start to look for developers. What we often see is that handshake MOU in the press between a government and a developer. But I would say there's a lot more work that needs to be done before that handshake even happens. PPPs are not simple, they're very difficult, but once you've done one, you can replicate it and you can move beyond the basics. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about here today. Our session is about green living, and I really hope we have time for some comments afterwards. But I think a lot of countries are still in that beginning, promoting the right enabling environment for PPPs, thinking about your laws, thinking about your institutions. Do you have everything in place to make it happen? Then you have to think about the commercial feasibility. Everything can be there, but is this feasible? Is the risk right for the developer? Is the risk right for the government? Then you need to push down market. Okay, you've established commercial feasibility, great, but how much further can you push? How can you stretch affordability and really reach people in need? And then, and this is my favorite, and this is what I kind of want to talk about a little bit today, is we need to make better cities. We need to do better than what we have done before. And I'm thinking about, I'm a big fan of Twitter, and there's a lot of these images on Twitter these days about kind of like redoing European cities. This is, a street from the Netherlands a few decades ago, and the same street today that I've stolen from someone on Tinder. We're redoing our cities in Europe, and our cities are pretty nice in Europe, but we still have this opportunity to redo them. What I love about housing PPPs is that we have the opportunity to get it right from the start. We have the opportunity to create neighborhoods at scale. If we're talking about tens of thousands of units, let's get it right from now, from the get-go, so we don't have to redo it in a few decades or even in a few centuries, like in the case of the Netherlands. Let's do it right now. So developing housing at scale presents enormous opportunities and challenges, which we just talked about. But for me, one of the biggest opportunities is you can make your cities walkable. You're now creating a few thousand units in the same land spot, right? Why have roads that lead to every single unit? Does everybody really want to drive and park their car in front of their home? That's what I hear in many African countries, which is maybe true today, but will that be true in a few decades? Is this really how you want to live? Most of the world is moving towards walkability, towards the 15-minute city, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, but it's this idea that all your services, all your jobs, everything you need are within a 15-minute walking distance from your home. And I love walking, and this sounds pretty ideal to me. So let's include walkability from the get-go. Let's include cycling roads, and I was really glad to see that in some of the examples from Egypt. But also let's focus on density. I know density is hard. I struggle to include density in some of my projects. A lot of African families are very tied to their land. Also, density is expensive. It is much, much cheaper, and we're looking at it in different countries in Africa right now, but sometimes the cost of a villa, just the construction cost, is about 2/3 of the cost of the same size apartments. And that's because when you build apartments, you have to ensure the structural safety of the building, whereas when you're building a villa, you can do a very light type of roof. So when you're trying to push affordability, it might not always go with pushing for density. So as governments, as a consultant working with governments, I often ask them, what do you prefer? What do you want to push? Do you want to push for density and building a maximum amount of units on the same site? Or do you want to push for affordability? Because they're often come in conflict, unfortunately. And I always get the same answer, they want both. But it's really hard, and the developers and contractors in the room know that it's very expensive to build apartments. And because the land that is chosen is often so cheap, you don't reap the benefits of going vertical. Yeah, in a few decades, when your cities have doubled or tripled in size, we may regret having built villas. We may highly, highly regret it, and we might have to tear them down and build apartments all over again. And talking about a waste of resources, you can build the greenest villa today, but if you have to tear it down in a few decades, what's the point? And another thing I think that was not talked about very much today is the infrastructure that surrounds the houses. Yes, the house can be green, but what about the infrastructure around it? Can we bring nature back to our cities? Can we bring nature back to our neighborhoods? Can we talk about nature-based solutions and infrastructure? And I have some really beautiful images from a project in Rwanda that's being developed by Green City Kigali. It's still in development, but I love how much attention they are paying to the details when it comes to green infrastructure. The project is being financed by KfW, and they have a pretty big commitment to that. But you'll see in the master plan, this master plan there is only the master plan for the nature-based solutions. So all those colors you see are different types of nature-based solutions that are being integrated into the development. And it's quite complex. You've got green pathways, you've got green bioswales. Kigali and the development itself is on a hill, so you have to think about drainage of water. Where is the water going to go? And in most developments I see today, well, we just build storm draining systems made out of concrete. The water goes in the concrete and it's gone and we're all happy. That's done. But there are better ways of doing this. And this is, for example, for the same project, a way of draining the water while filtering the water. So by the time it arrives at the bottom, the water is cleaner and it's better, and I'm not sure how drinkable it is, but it's closer to being that. Why is this not more included into our developments? We know climate change is going to affect rain, precipitation all around Africa. Why not include nature-based solutions in everything we do? Okay, there are a few drawbacks, and I can mention. They take up more space, right? And space is an issue. Putting together a concrete little drain is much more efficient than thinking about bioswales and following the natural topography of the environment and letting the water filter on its own. But this is the beauty of PPPs. The government has just allocated a pretty big chunk of land to do something really cool with. So why not include nature within the design of the project you are building? So these are more images from Green City Kigali. They're just amazing. I really can't wait to see this project be built up. It's a project I could see myself live in. It's walkable, it's green. The designs of the houses include all the green aspects we've been talking about over the past few days. It's exciting to see this work come together. It's not easy. Again, there are so many experts on this project, it's hard to keep track of who is doing what. It's a new type of expertise, this nature-based solutions infrastructure, but it's needed. And I think, if we're talking about developing tens of thousands of units at a time, we really need to do better. We need to go beyond the basics of building little houses with little pathways and, garages and cars, and think about what city do you want to live in the next few decades? What do you want these communities to look like for your kids? And I think that's what Kesia was getting at. Like, what do we want to leave behind? Because we cannot keep on rebuilding the same thing over and over again. We went through it in the United States. We built the public housing units in the 50s, and we tore them all down because they were awful. Let's not make the same mistake in Africa. Let's build it right from the start and include these opportunities now. So I'm going to pass it over to Jacques, my colleague, who is working on 2 active opportunities. So any developers who might be interested in actually working on a PPP with IFC, please come and talk to us afterwards. Thank you. This one, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, and I would like to thank the organizer for this opportunity. Yeah? So my objective here is twofold. First, to promote the project that I'm working on. I know we have developers here. So developers are the private sector investors that we are targeting when we go to the tender process. I would also like to, appeal to government officials, because they are the ones whom we advise in implementing PPP transactions. And as Olivia mentioned, PPP are complex. So having a transaction advisor is really helpful. And yeah, so here are our contacts. Oh, sorry. How do I go back? Here, no? Excellent. Okay. All right. So, I don't want to have the same issue as the winner of the competition here, no? That we did.
You want to go back to?
No, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Yeah, thanks so much. All right, so moving forward now. Yes, so I work for IFC, and IFC belongs to the World Bank Group. Of course, many of you, sometimes you hear the World Bank, the World Bank. This is good to put things in perspective. The World Bank Group is 5 entities, of which IFC. So the 5 entities are IBRD and IDA, known as World Bank. I think you may see World Bank here. So they deal with government, extending loan on a concessional basis or on a commercial basis based on the income level of the countries. IBRD are richer countries, so there you have commercial like basis loan. And IDA are like poorer countries where you have concessional loans. They have other products, of course, that I did not mention here. And in the middle, you have IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. So our role is to promote the private sector. And we do have 2 entities, the investment arm of IFC. Their role is to invest in the private sectors, private companies in various countries, so investment in the form of loan or equity. And we do have also the advisory arm of, to which the PPP transaction advisory belongs. So the PPP transaction advisory, our role is to advise government in implementing PPPs with the objective of bringing private sector participation. So the end result is private sector. Then we have MIGA, which offers guarantees to de-risk investment so that investors could invest at a cheaper price. And we have Exceed also, that is there to settle disputes between investors and member countries. So about the PPP Transaction Advisory, we have been around for more than 30 years. We are a group of 150 plus professionals spread over the world. Currently, we are working on about 110 transactions, 1/5 of which in Africa and 6% in housing. And this is a typical mandate timeline. Of course, you can say, hi, but this, Jacques, that is quite long. I will explain why it could take that long. So a PPP is complex. You need a series of expertise. For instance, in Djibouti, we are working with Miyamoto, which is the technical specialist, so supporting us. In the team of Miyamoto, we do have architects, we do have specialists in housing finance, so they are supporting us. We do also have legal like specialists, international law firms, because to implement a PPP, you need also to fit into the environment. So they support in doing the due diligence. We do also have ENS, environmental and social specialists, because these big projects do have an impact on the environment and also social impact. So our mandate is divided into two phases, typically into two phases. We have the phase one. So the phase one is called due diligence and structuring. So it could take up to 8 months. There is a process in hiring consultants to support us. And once we mobilize the team, IFC acts as lead transaction advisor with a specialty in finance. So we carry these due diligences, at the end of which we come up with what we call a transaction structuring report, which is the allocation of risk between the private and the public. So this is subject to the approval of the government. In the process also, we do sound the market, the developers, the investors, to see if they like the transaction structure. I will show you a live example. And after we get the okay from the government, we move to the tendering phase, starting with marketing the project, pre-selecting potential bidders, and bidders also have to do their own due diligence, because the data that we give them, there is no obligation for them to trust us, because this is an important contract that they have to sign. And so they do the due diligence. We draft the contract with our lawyers after a series of interactions to take their feedback. So we move to the tender process, and at the end of the process, we select a winning bidder, which is called commercial close. And after that, it is not shown here, but the winning bidder also need to secure financing. So that financing could come from IFC, but that's very rare because we do have conflict of interest issues. Most of the time, they come with their own financier. So this is the team that I just described here. So in addition to IFC, we do have various experts. Sometimes we can even use communication specialists. In the case of Djibouti, for instance, we have hired some communication specialists to support also on communicating around the project, because they will be allocating the units. So we need to communicate what are the criteria for allocation. And also, if we are working on certain construction like features to be green, we need to educate the population. So help us to design, to craft the message that will be put up there. And these are the current transactions in the housing sector. These are PPP projects. So developers, investors should expect them to come on stream probably starting next year. Some of them have already started, like the project in Fiji, where we have done the request for qualification, which is basically to shortlist potential investors. The Bihar also in India, we are starting the IFQ. So the first one, Djibouti, between 1,500 and 2,000 units. Then we have Kenya also, and I have seen the Kenya National Housing Corporation here. So we are supporting them to develop up to 3,500 units. In Togo, Olivia is also supporting the other team. There it is a bigger project, very ambitious. We don't know what will happen. And so these are the projects that we are currently working on. We are doing due diligence and structuring. And these are mandates being negotiated. We do have what we call PBSA. So these are purpose-built student accommodation projects in Malawi, up to 15,000 beds. And also in Nigeria, around 7,800 beds. So these one we are still negotiating with the government. So these are case studies. Here I will be very brief in a nutshell. So this was our first affordable housing PPP in India. So the model is a cross-subsidy. Government gave 2/3 of the land at no cost for the developer to build and hand the unit over to the government. And the developer had 1/3 of the land to develop their own project and remunerate themselves. So this is technically cross-subsidization. So as you can see, the construction cost was 8,000, but they were able to, to sell to low income at 2,300, which is very, very rare, by the way, because these are 35 square meters. So this is like a dream, but we have seen prices like 35, 40, so we should be careful here. So the winning bidder was selected in December 2016. And the bidding parameter, these are technical things. Normally for this type of discussion, we should have more time, but it's okay. So it was awarded the project after offering the lowest government subsidy, because after remunerating themselves, they needed extra money from the government. So who is offering the lowest money? So 70 million invested. And Kenyatta University, 10,000 student unit. The agreement was signed in 2015, some difficulties in implementation. And this is the transaction in focus. So the Djibouti, as I said, 1,500 to 2,000 units on 19 hectares of land. So it's very clear targeting household earning between 450 and 1,400 per month. And also, we do have a mix here because they are also targeting higher income. So you will see, I think, in the next slide, when I try to be a bit more technical, why are we doing a mixed development? And in Djibouti also, this is based on the law. Only the government is authorized to sell or rent affordable housing unit. So clearly the legislation will define a structure, which is below. So we do have government pays model. So for the affordable housing, the unit are handed over to the government for a monthly payment. The scheme is rent to own, because initially I think they tried direct sales, and given the income level, it wasn't a success. And we do also have the other user pays model for the upper classes. So these are things on which we will seek investors' feedback as we do the structuring. The objective in Djibouti is to do something that could be replicable. The challenge is here, high cost of construction in Djibouti, up to 150 times what we do have in India and China, larger project. So the main reason, import of construction material, we do have VAT, also labor cost, and they're mostly basically using concrete. So we need to educate them also to change, because the population has a preference for concrete, which is quite expensive. And also another preference, given the typical household size of 6 people per family, they do not like 1 bedroom plus a living room, minimum 2 bedroom and 1 living room, and sizes around 80 to 90. So this has a huge impact on cost. And I think here I put a note for the audience. What is the role of government here? Provision of land, we have discussed that. If you are doing PPP, affordable housing PPP, government need to bring something also to the table. So tax breaks, we do have that in Djibouti. And I think the other will be covered in the later slide. So what are the green opportunities here? Through preliminary discussion, I think we do have a modular design. Also, we are thinking about designing innovative solutions such as capturing rainwater, and we will seek EDGE certification. And of course, we always have to respect the IFC, ENS standard, which are the reference standard when it comes to ENS. And I think this is after this is the last slide. That is very interesting. So what should be also our takeaway beside my objective? PPP is not the panacea. Yeah, because I hear people saying PPP, this is not the panacea. So let's look at the income level and see what type of product can be designed for them. So P510 are the lowest, percentile 510, meaning they are earning more than 5 to 10% of the population. And this is where you have the biggest population. That's why when we talk about affordable housing, people always focus on, the poorer. So for this type of population, you cannot go for a PPP because the investor is coming for a return. So usually government is leading these interventions. They borrow money and they try to build some areas to remove the slums. In Djibouti, they have what they call zero slum project. They borrow money from the World Bank to try to do something. In the middle, this is where you may have PPP, usually by mixing. This is what we call cross subsidy, because if you build a unit, for instance, maybe the lower middle income cannot afford, so we need to find a scheme whereby they do it. No, it's okay, don't worry. And then you have the high end. The high end is private to private. People are already earning a lot of money, so this is private to private. And the last slide, yeah, YPPPs, I think we have already said that. The takeaway here on YPPP, you improve delivery efficiency, so you also like borrow private sector expertise. And yeah, these are things that need to be addressed, you know, in order to have PPP work. So we do have like the choice of land. Very important thing that I will say here, provide land with basic infrastructure. Because if you provide naked land, it makes it difficult. Some government at times, they do want to provide the land which is basic and the developer to provide the basic infra, which has a cost. We do have other things such as like the time to grant, construction loans, and other things. So I believe we are constrained by time, so that was the conclusion. Thank you.
Question?
Testing.
Thanks very much for a very insightful presentation. Coming from the ground, I can tell you we always say PPP, PPP, PPP. Something I didn't see, maybe for Jacques, it might be some of your colleagues on the panel also can tell us, but what are you looking for, right? From an IFC perspective, like it's always very curious. I mean, I think all of us in this table who saw that 2,300 per unit price, we were like, do you mean per square meter? But we're pretty sure you meant per unit. But, you know, yes, you bring in the parties together, but what is that return profile you're looking for? Are you purely looking at PPPs with grant funding? Do you ever get paid back? So from an economic perspective, what do those projects really look like? And at least in the list that you put there, just very generally, would love to hear.
Okay, so thanks for the question. So there is one thing that we need also to understand here. The return is for the investor, not for IFC. We are just advising the government. So the investor will come with a return that they are targeting based on the risk profile of the project. That takes into account the country, the currency, all these things. And one thing that we do when we start also is to try to benchmark that, to try to find out what is the return on equity, return on also like capital that they are seeking. So based on that, we do the analysis and try to come up with a bid parameter, which is like the price, to try to see if the project as it is structured, like taking into account cost of land, all these things, makes sense. Now, if we need a subsidy...
Give us a number, man.
You say?
Give us a number. I'm really curious. I want to hear you say, because you're advising them, so I really want to hear you say, is it a 14% IRR or a...
It is difficult to give you a number. I'm going to take an example. If you go to Djibouti, for instance, the currency is pegged to the USD. Yeah. Developers there, they get construction loan at 6%. Wow. If you go to another country, in local currency, you can have maybe something at 15%. But usually, you know, we can say, okay, return on equity in nominal terms, for instance, maybe between 12 and 15%, and you do your analysis based on that. That's why we also go out and sound the market. This is a discovery process. You see? Yeah, please go ahead.
If I may add to that, are you a developer?
Yeah.
Great, perfect. That's why we're here. So we're currently working in Togo and Djibouti, very, very different countries. In Djibouti, they're expecting 90 square meter, 100 square meter houses. In Togo, we're going to be looking at things that are way smaller. The $2,300 price point that you saw for India is probably, I shouldn't speak too soon, but unrealistic for anything in Africa, right? So that number, just take it out of your head. Where the market currently is, if the market is here in this country, we're trying to bring it down here, right? We're not trying to work, you know, you can't work miracles with your first PPP. We're just trying to bring the market down. The reason for being here today is that Togo and Djibouti are very small countries, and the developer population of those countries are very, very small. And for these large-scale PPP projects, we need developers who have financial and technical capacity. And so we were really hoping to have people like you here who would be interested in saying, hey, you know, I don't know these countries, or maybe I do, but I would be interested in learning about these opportunities. Our job as a technical advisor is to speak to different developers and hear from you, yes, this project is interesting, or no, this project is too risky and it doesn't offer a good enough return, and then go back and restructure the project. Because if the developers are not interested, the project won't work.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted to say. We will go out and sound the market. We do have some ideas in mind. So after we sound the market, also we adjust the structure, even the return that are expected based on the profile of the country. But we do not impose something. And also, in order to achieve these objectives, we can tell the government, you know, maybe here we need you to offer a subsidy, or we need to do A, B, or C. It's a very long and iterative process.